Okay, everyone, I want to apologize because for the last, I'm not sure how many minutes, and I need to take a drink here real quick. My mic was turned off. It is easier to do these audio checks when I have a webcam. Um, I do not have one today because I already started the stream late and I did not want to take the extra time to set up my lights and webcam before starting the stream, but I might as well have taken that time because I mistakenly left my microphone muted. So, I've been working with Ubisoft's with an anim set, a motion capture dataset provided by Ubisoft. That's free for non-commercial use. You can find it on GitHub. I'll be making a video on the process for getting them downloaded and into Unreal, and I've gotten one of those animations into Unreal. It's a pretty convoluted process. I had to add a root bone in, and I'm gonna make sure I actually do have audio right now. It looks like I do. Okay. So I've got one of the animations in. There was a big process because I had to add a root bone in, and I'd realized while my microphone was muted that this animation's root bone isn't working. I've done the process over and over again. I've had to tweak it. I've had issues with there being 90 degrees of keyframed rotation that threw absolutely everything off with the plugin I was using to add that all in. And I was just in the process of having that realization and looking at some stuff in Blender and explaining part of that when I realized I was muted. So I will be making a video on the process. I honestly can't remember if I've said that since my microphone's been unmuted or not, but I am planning on making a video or two on how to download these motion capture animations and how to get them into Unreal Engine 5 and retargeted with the IK retargeter to the mannequin skeleton. But I have Blender open and I have an animation in here, and I'll show you guys that the root here for the animation is at the center of the world, the origin point of the mesh and of the skeletal mesh of the skeleton. There's not really a mesh here. And there is no root bone for the skeleton. And so I'm using a plugin here, which is a called Mixamo Root Baker. And I just give it the hip bone name because these skeletons are named the same way as the Mixamo skeletons. I'm going to tell it that not to use Z, and I'm just going to click convert single. And there is some sort of error, so let's try that again. That's odd. This was working just a moment ago. But I honestly might be able to make this work because it did add a root baker in. So it adds an empty. So what I might be able to do is remove these keyframes in object mode. I'm going to be making a video on the process. We would be doing stuff purely in Unreal Engine here if this animation here didn't have a root bone. And that seems to have actually deleted the keyframes. So what I'm trying to do now that I have this, I'm gonna apply, and now it's not keyframed. So okay, we're gonna need to figure out how to get this to work. I was working a minute ago. I just did this whole process with this animation. Hmm. This is very strange. I'm just trying different settings here. Hmm. I need to disable use Z not on ground, but that doesn't seem to be my issue either. Okay, so this is a bit of a dilemma here because this was working a couple minutes ago. Awesome, thank you. So, let's see. Okay, now, despite having used Blender for years, I do not know how to pull up any sort of output log for it. I could go over to scripting, and I guess that's where it would be. Okay, cool. Expected an integer type, not a float. That's interesting. Okay, so if I zoom in here, I mean, I don't think it should be aligned. Okay, I'll try this one more time, and I think, not sure how to address it, giving it a float instead of an integer. I'm going to try just deleting it, and then bringing the file back in. And so this was, which one was it? Run to subject1.bvh, I believe. Okay. I'm gonna scale it down. And the first step I take, I'll just walk you guys through the process and maybe it'll work this time, is I set to the, if you're familiar with Blender, though some of you guys might not be, I usually just do Unreal stuff on my channel, so I imported the BVH file just by going to File, Import BVH. Now it imported at a very large scale, and don't pay attention to what I'm doing now. I'm just trying to undo, and I undid too many steps. There we go. And so I just selected it, pressed S on my keyboard to enter scale mode, 0.01 to scale it down to the correct size. And now I'm pressing Alt G to set it back to the origin point, to reset its location, essentially. Now I'll go into pose mode. I'll select the pelvis. It's already here because I just did this, but I'm going to move the 3D cursor to the pelvis by holding Shift S and moving my mouse down and letting go of Shift S while I'm hovering over cursor to selected. So if my 3D cursor is over here, I can click the pelvis and move it there. Then I'll go into view, to location. I'll hit 0 and the Z for the location of the 3D cursor. I'll go back into object mode. I'm going to select this, go to object, select set origin, origin to 3D cursor. I'll do a better job at explaining and I'll go a bit slower in the actual video. Then I'm just pressing Alt G to set the position of this skeleton to the world origin, and then Shift S, cursor to selected, just to put my cursor to world origin too, because it's cleaner, neater, and I like it seeing it there, and there's not really any other reason for that. So now if I play, the animation is no longer offset. It'll play starting at the world origin, which is what we need. And now, if I go into edit mode, the base pose of the skeleton is completely messed up. So we're going to ignore the rest of it for now, and all we need to focus on are the incredibly tiny hand and feet bones. So I'm going to use that same process to select the joint tier and set the cursor to it. Then and I also hit 1 to look at it from a forward orthographic view. 1 on my number pad. Gonna select the foot bone, maybe it's an arm bone, and I'm gonna rotate it by 90 degrees. So just R and then type 90. And I also have the 3D cursor selected as the pivot point in this drop down menu up here. And I'm going to do the feet now. And now finally the head needs rotated by 90 degrees. I can go back into object mode and you won't see a difference because those bones are so small, but now they're rotated, they're oriented correctly. Now, the next step is I could do this 2 ways. So the problem here is the default pose. It can't be this, it has to be the first, well, it has to have a root bone. I would usually export this as an FBX and re-import it to get the default pose to be this T-pose here, but I'm not sure if it's necessary. As long as it has a root bone, I should be able to import it into the provided FBX skeleton. I think that was a bit of an old workflow that stayed with me as I continued to try to figure out the process for getting this into Unreal properly. So I'm going to go straight to Mixamo. I'm going to uncheck use Z, and I am going to, I don't think, I'll just leave that on its default. I'm going to convert it. Still not working. Okay. Expected an integer type, not a float. This is very odd. This is just working, and I have no idea why it's giving it an integer instead of a float unless for some reason the start frame isn't on 1 for some odd reason. I can move it over and back, but that wouldn't fix the other 7,000 frames in the animation. It could be the problem with the animation itself. But it did give us a MT that's constrained to the X and Y position and orientation of the pelvis. It might be enough for me to do the rest of this process for this animation manually. Although that's not my intention for what this stream is going to cover. So, or I could bring in the other animation. I might just do that. So that we have something to work with. Well, let's see, because I think this one will work better for motion matching anyway. I don't think Blender's updated since, maybe. I'm using, Blender 3 point, just LTS through Steam. That's what this project is, this Blender project is in, so that could be it. The plugin hasn't been updated for 2 years. Um, uh, Blender 2.93. I have that, or I could throw in or install Blender 3.0 instead of 3. Whatever we're on now. Um, hmm. I'm gonna try this with the other animation first, because if I can get the old process to work within the current version, I'll do that. If not, I'll try it in a different version of Blender. Um, so let's see. Okay, same issue. So what? I feel like there might be one thing I did differently, slightly differently than before. I'm trying to. No, okay. So, yep, it does not work today, and it worked the other day. So, hmm, let's try this in 2.93. And I'm going to briefly turn off display capture, just because the default import file is probably going to be for a project or one of two projects that I've been working on that are not public yet. Will be eventually, but is not something I want to announce here until either of them are ready. So let's see here. Downloads, Ubisoft Anims, BVH files. Nope, I moved some of them in the ones I wanted to do into locomotion. So let's do run to subject 1 and import BVH. Okay. So I'm scaling it down, and I'm going through the same process for the third time. Hopefully it'll work this time. Oops. Did not have the pivot point set to be the 3D cursor. Okay. So the skeleton is fixed. Set the end frame to 7,330 should do it. Yeah, they're going back into a T-pose, so that'll work. And now I'm going to try this again. There we go. So my mistake was using Blender 3 and not Blender 2.93. I'm not currently interested in joining any other teams. I'm already working on a project with a small team of my, with a small team, well, 2 different projects with 2 different teams. And that along with the YouTube channel means I don't really have the time to make any sort of commitment to a third team for something. However, feel free to share the idea or send it over to me or send some screenshots or things of your progress in Discord. I'd be happy to give you whatever sort of feedback you'd want. Or if you need help with an issue, I'm not super familiar with the crypto stuff, but when it comes to actually integrating it with Unreal, so I can't help with that aspect of it, but I'll happily provide feedback. So now, at this point in the process, Blender is frozen. And it'll stay frozen for the next 5 to 10 minutes while it processes the 7,000 frames of animation here. So, let's go back to Unreal Engine. And I'll show you guys the IK retargeter setup that I have while we wait. But, oops, my mic. But before I get to that, so this is the name of the data set. So I've just created a folder in the characters folder of the third person template. And I've just brought in the skeletal mesh provided with the animation dataset. And I've created an IK rig for it. That is very simple. I will not, okay, it's not very simple. There's a bit more going on here. I do not currently. Nope, Blender is not crashed. It's just not responding, and it'll do that for a while, just because it's a lot of data for it to process. But it'll end up responding and things if you just give it time. It will work. It'll start working again, and the animation will be processed, and it will have a root bone. So I've just copied the mannequin IK rig, the way it structured things, pretty much. I did not include any of the stuff for the twist bones. This rig does not have them, for like forearm twist, for example. And then I added, it's really just the same setup as the Unreal Engine 5 mannequin, full body IK. Does it look super great? The weight painting isn't really super great with this skeleton. I found that the animations look better on the regular Unreal Engine skeletons. So I then used an IK retargeter with that rig as the base rig, selected the mannequin rig. I could also retarget it to the UE4 mannequin. I did have to edit the pose of the to be a T-pose here for this. Let's check in on Blender. Okay, still not responding. Alright, so, well, I do notice one thing off with the pose. I'll go ahead and fix that. And it is that the hands can be rotated 5 to 10 degrees. Gosh, if I can select them here. And they'd match better. Yeah, 10 degrees each hand, I think. And Blender shouldn't take too much longer to process the animation. Yeah, I think that's a bit closer. Or it might take longer. I really don't remember the last couple of times I've processed the animations. I've done them at times where I've been stepping away from computers, like for meals, and I've gone back. So it might take a little while. So I'm trying to think of something to do in the meantime because, like I said before, I thought this animation had the root bone in it, but it didn't. So here we are. So I could, currently, this is just the setup from the previous stream with the Lyra animations being used as inputs. Kind of sort of works. There's lots of settings. It'll just break if you change them because it's still a very experimental plugin for motion matching. It seems like we're getting a low frame rate here, probably because Blender is doing so much right now. Yep, we are getting a bit of a choppy frame rate, probably a combination of me streaming and Blender trying to process all of those frames. And it's not really even Blender, it's just a plugin that someone wrote for Blender, so I have no idea how optimized that Python is. I don't know Python. It seems like you would be able to do it in a way where you just step through the process like a simulation in Blender, the way it'll simulate each frame as you get to it, and it'll just bake stuff for I guess not. I guess it does have to have all the data in memory because it's modifying the whole skeleton, adding a root bone in, so I'm not going to spend too much time thinking on that. So, again, trying to figure out a engaging way to pass the time here while we wait for that animation to process. Open to suggestions. I could continue to toy with the motion matching with the looping animations, but I don't really see the point there with that. I really have no idea how much longer Blender is going to take. I'll definitely be more prepared for the next stream. But no, this is probably sucks for you guys more than it does for me, just waiting on my computer's Blender 2.93 to unfreeze and process stuff. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and open up the animation blueprint. With the motion warping, I have not spent time with it. I've spent time with the pose warping stuff for like orientation, stride warping, locomotion stuff, but not the motion warping with montages. It is something I'm interested in, and when I get started, I'm going to be, for one of the projects I'm working on, I'm going to be working on, I was working on a combat system for a while, prototyping that out. I'm going to be working on that again in Unreal Engine 5 soon here. We've made the transition over to the new engine version, and I'll be using motion warping with the montages for it. But in the context of mantling, for example, I have not worked with it. It's something I'd like to do at some point in the future, but it's not something I've spent time on yet, unfortunately. So I might switch gears because this could process really quickly, or it could take a while to process. I thought it took not as long, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that I've taken breaks from working on stuff while I've waited for the stuff to process, and I've just come back later in the day and it's been done. So I honestly, because that one animation didn't import correctly or didn't process correctly, or I overwrote something incorrectly with the file, that sort of derailed my entire plan for this stream. So let's hmm, I think I'm gonna give this a couple more minutes to, oh, okay. There we go. It's processed. Okay. So we have the processed animation here. It has a root bone. Hide that plane. And now that we can see the origin point of the animation is between the feet under the pelvis, like it should be. So we can now export this as an FBX. Thanks for cooperating, computer, while I'm trying to move this window. There we go. So this is run to subject 1 output is what I'll name it. So run to subject 1 output.fbx. I'm exporting selected objects and I'm not adding leaf bones. There we go. Now we're exporting and that'll only take a minute. But it will freeze up again and there we go. Okay, so let's go back over into characters and I'm gonna delete this animation. I'm going to import the run to subject 1 output FBX. To the Ubisoft skeletal mesh. And Unreal is frozen. Everything seems to be freezing today. There we go. And it looks, well, nothing's completely broken. And we do have a root bone. Awesome. The neck and head on this mesh act weirdly. I found that that does not transfer to the mannequin. But I believe I might have exported it at 24 frames per second instead of 30 frames per second. Yes, so I'm going to re-export this. I will wait in Blender so for just a moment here. There we go. It's exported. And now back into Unreal. And I'm going to re-import this animation. Okay. There we go. Now they're running at the correct speed. Or at least walking or moving. So the next step is to take this animation, and in the end I want to actually combine it with others, other animations from the dataset that are retargeted to the mannequin. But for now, I'm just going to use this one for this stream. And here we go. Run to subject 1 output retargeted. I'm going to throw it into a dataset on its own and we're going to see what happens. And I doubt it's going to work. There's points where it T-poses, there's points where we don't want to use the motion data, essentially. And I'm pretty sure the plugin provides us with some modifiers. And my computer's running a bit slow, so I'm closing out of both of these instances of Blender. Or at least Unreal is going slow on me right now. I'm not sure why. Okay, I think it might be working now. Maybe. Nope, still pretty frozen. Oh, and my mouse is teleported to my other screen. Okay. Okay, we're unfrozen now. So characters, mannequins, animations, and I'm going into pose search database. I'm going to delete the sequences database, and I'm going to grab that run to subject 1 output retargeted. Okay. So I completely forgot one big thing. And it's that we need to enable root motion. There we go. Let's save that. I don't need all these windows open anymore now. Okay, so I mean, it's looking good if it would just stay in, of course it's not oriented correctly and it's using the wrong segments. It's like it's not taking rotation into account much. It looks better than it did last time I tried this. So let's force a root lock. and try it with that. There we go. So, this is interesting. It's found a portion of the animation where the character is in the middle of some sort of pivot or turn, and now that's interesting. I'm going to go ahead and open up the character blueprint. And I'm going to turn use controller rotation yaw on. I'm going to character movement, and I'm setting oh, I'm in the movement trajectory component. I want to be in the movement component. I'm going to not orient rotation to movement, because this was a strafing data set. So, it's definitely not ideal, but yeah, it's certainly not ideal. This is definitely something wrong here. And it's jumping around a bit too. And I think there's a couple of things we could do to try to get this working better. So I'm going to open up the animation. And I'm going to add a couple notify tracks. I'll just leave it at 2 for now. And I believe there are some notify states that come with the plugins. No. Maybe I need to enable a plugin here. I thought there were notifies to set, like priority and ignore certain parts of an animation. So there is a lot of data here, and if we tell it to prioritize certain sections of just running around, it might work a bit better. At least that's what I'd hope. But I'm going to take a look at the root bone, and I'm going to see what it's doing. It is rotating correct. Ooh, okay. There are some big issues there. You can see the root bone is flipping its orientation. It should not be doing that. And that is probably an issue with the approach I've taken with Blender. So I did not catch that before. There's not really a fix for that. The fix technically would be to try a paid plugin that claims to do this, or to manually keyframe the 7,000 frames of animation. Okay, so motion matching. That's a good question. I got the question the last stream too. let's see. It's a so it's not exclusive from the state machine approach to locomotion animation in games, but I'm going to because you can combine the two, but I'm going to explain things in a way where it might sound like they're exclusive just to better explain motion matching by comparing and contrasting the two and how they do things differently, even if you can use motion matching inside of a state in a state machine. So, in a classical animation state machine setup, you um, have a character um, that so you have a mesh, and we're talking in terms of I mean, this applies to root motion and in-place locomotion systems. And you have your states, you have your transitions between states, and a designer or a designer of some sort needs to go into the state machine and create all the logic. You need an idle state, a loop start state, a stop state, a start state, a pivot state, so on and so forth. You don't need all of those in every system. You might need more than those in some systems. And you have to anticipate all sorts of situations the player might be in. And you have a limited set of animations that those states will play, small looping animations, and you're constrained to that. Motion matching is a technique where you just give the computer a bunch of animation data and then let the computer make sense of that animation data for you, so that you then give that computer a trajectory, a predicted trajectory, and a historic trajectory. So essentially, previous orientations and rotations, so previous character transforms, and then predicted future character transforms. And based on those transforms, it's going to choose a frame of animation from the database it has to play. And there are other calculations it'll take into account, like um, let's think, just like where it's at in the animation. You don't want it to be switching from one frame to a frame somewhere else, and there's a big jump. So good systems will try to preserve where you're at in the animation data set, so that, like, for example, you can set bones to track. So it'll track um, that's a good way of looking at it. So you could do it based on like a root bone velocity, but more often it's done by, I mean, you have that trajectory, but then you also combine it with transforms and velocities of certain bones. So you could motion match with root bones and um, with like feet bones, so that there's continuous animation and you're not jumping all over just because you've moved so many units from just because this frame has so many units that you've moved, and that same frame has the same amount of movements that match with your next frame in the actual game. So you just give the computer a data set, let it make sense of that data set, and you just tell it motion match this character. And it'll play different bits of animations from that data set and weave things together so that a designer doesn't have to build out all the complexity of state machines. For example, even though it's not working yet with my setup, all that I'm doing inside of the animation blueprint, um, I might be doing a bit more actually because I have jumping separated in its own state. But if I go wrong one, I think I have this set up in Manny. Yep. So you can see here, instead of using the locomotion state machine, I just have a motion matching node. Gave it a database. I use inertialization for inertialized blending. Give it a pose history so that the motion matching can read the pose history. I do not need orientation warping anymore, or right now. I should bypass that. And then this locomotion cached pose exists within this state in this main state machine. And so this cached pose is motion matching, and I can blend out of it into jumping if I need to, but all ground movement is motion matching. I don't have any sort of state set up with starts, stops, pivots, loops, idles, any of that. You could combine it. Your loop could just be motion matched. Your idle could be something else, so you could play specific idle animations. Um, that's There is an impact on performance in its current state in Unreal Engine 5. I'm not sure exactly what that impact is. I haven't tried measuring it, and the plugin is also experimental and in a super early phase of development. So it depends on the type of motion matching. You have different types. You have like algorithmic motion matching, which just uses code and algorithms, which is what this is. It's what the paid plugin on the marketplace, Motion Symphony, which is really great, is. Then you have like stuff like learned motion matching, which trains a neural network based on an algorithmic approach to motion matching like this, so that it runs in a more lightweight manner. But I'm not sure what the exact performance cost is, and that's definitely going to change as the plugin is developed more. Um, Modern day hardware should be able to run it just fine on main characters. You might not want to do it on all your NPCs in the world. If you have large crowds, you might want to use standard locomotion stuff for them, but you might be able to do that too. I'm not sure. But for your main character, modern hardware can handle it just fine. Ubisoft has used it in all of their recent games, their Assassin's Creed games. I know The Last of Us Part 2 used motion matching for its locomotion. It's becoming the new norm for AAA games. No. Red Dead Redemption was warped root motion, which was combining root motion locomotion and in-place locomotion with motion matching. I should note that motion matching can be used with in-place locomotion and root motion locomotion. That's one thing I'd like to try here, actually. We might get some really interesting results. Right now I'm using in-place, where I'm just using regular capsule input movement. And so Red Dead Redemption sort of blends root motion with in place in different places, and root motion gives you a more realistic look than in place, because you're pulling animation from the root bone, your motion from the root bone of an animation. You're not trying to match animations with different movement states, but you can only move in the ways that your animations move. So you need a lot of coverage with your animations, which is why root motion and motion matching can work really well together if you have enough animation coverage. No, I know that going back to your thing about the ref pose, I know that the problem with the orientation flipping is with Blender. Um, I don't know if there's a way to fix that, and I'm rotated for some reason. So that's an issue, but here I am using root motion, and it's not really sure what animation to pick. And I don't know why I'm rotated around 90 degrees. I thought that I had fixed that. So it's not necessarily always moving in the way I want it to move in. And it's not choosing all the right animations. A large part of that is due to the orientation flipping that's all over the place with the root bone. And I didn't notice it before, and I have no idea how to fix it with Blender right now. I might look into trying to do it in Cascader, or with maybe a paid plugin in Blender. Um, it's really jumping around a lot. Maybe I can try to reduce that. Uh, I'm not sure where to get those anim notifies. I know there's a way to get them, that they're built into one of the plugins. I'm going to go over into the anim graph. I'm going to go to the motion matching node and let's see. I'm going to set that to like 20 and see if that has a effect. So yeah, we can see it jump around. I think that's when the root is flipping around and the animation is oriented the wrong way. I'm gonna try turning off strafing again. That's only a temporary solution. I'm not sure how much coverage this specific animation has either. And coverage might be a problem too. So if it wouldn't jump around as much, it would be working fairly well here. The problem is I don't think it is it. It's interesting. So the problem there was, see there it did a bit of a spin, and there it did a pivot too. So if it, yeah, this is looking better. Definitely not perfect. It's not choosing the right parts of the animations. But this animation set feels like it, I feel like it's doing much better with this than strafing. And of course I'm using root motion here. So I'm going to try it without again. I just want to see what that changes. So it's not even playing a pivot of any sort. Root motion might really be the way to go. Lots of coverage in root motion. I'm definitely going to turn root motion back on. The plugin is again still experimental. I'm trying to think of a way to tell it, which sections of the animation to use. Anim notifies would be a good one. That would be the way to do it. I know I've seen like a screenshot somewhere on the internet of someone using them with this stuff. And I'm also trying to think of a way to get it to not jump around so much, to pick something and to stick to it. So I'm going to reset the bloom time. So this is big, the min % improvement. How much better the search result must be compared to the current pose in order to jump to it. Note this feature won't work quite as advertised until search data rescaling is implemented. So it's in development. I'm going to turn that off, 0. And I'm going to see if it's more jumpy. It should be, theoretically. But it's looking less jumpy to me, actually. Much less jumpy. The blending helps a lot too, I think. But there's a good example of a spin. So I think finding a way to fix that root bone orientation and being able to give different animation sections different priorities would be the way to go from here, and to give it more coverage. So getting that second running animation, or all the running animation sets, into the database would really help it. I know tracking hands and feet breaks it and causes it to crash, or no, causes it to do an A pose and not motion match at all. That was really good. That land, and it didn't. That was really good, which is interesting. I think that was just a coincidence that it chose it though, but I want to see if I can get that to happen again. Yeah. But from that data set, it's able to kind of animate what's going on here. Nowhere near perfectly, but for a drunk character, this might work perfectly. um, and that's another really cool thing about motion matching. In one of the talks Ubisoft did, it might have been at a GDC, I'm not sure. One of the data sets they created for one of their earlier systems was one where all the motion data was someone getting pushed around. So wherever you walk in the game, you are constantly stumbling and almost falling over. Well, not really. It wasn't a game. It was like a demo that they'd put together for themselves in-house and had recordings of that they were showing from their testing. But it's some really awesome tech. I think Unreal just has a bit of a ways to go with it, and I need to really figure out how to tell it which sets of the animation to prioritize and how to get the animation here in a way where the root bone isn't flipping around its rotation, and that might be me manually keyframing things. And again, if so, we'll see how it goes. But there's some segments up here when it works a little bit, or I can just see the potential, and I can see how good the locomotion works. I think it's a matter of coverage and a matter of telling it which segments of animation to prioritize, so it doesn't try to pivot while I'm walking as much. And tracking the hands maybe as well. And if there would be some way to try to keep it pointing forward, that would be great too. But this is the case, it's spinning around walking backwards, I think is a case of the root bone orientation being flipped. So it wouldn't, and because it flips, it tries to pivot. I bet that's what's causing the pivots then, guys. So I guess I will look into fixing that off stream, maybe between this stream and the next. But I do not want to take you guys along with me for the ride of manually keyframing 7,000 frames of animation if that's what I end up having to do. That may very well end up being what I have to do with this dataset without like Maya or Motion Builder or something. And even if I had Maya and Motion Builder for it, I would have no idea how to use it. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to end out the stream here, I think, because I think this is really promising here with the root motion enabled. And maybe before next week's stream, I will have an animation with a root bone that works and is fixed. If not, I'll stream something that's not motion matching, probably. Maybe go back to the distance matching locomotion stuff for a stream. Or I might even maybe start streaming a bit of VR development stuff. I just got a VR headset not too long ago for the first time, and I'm starting to learn how to develop for it. So that could be fun too. And eventually I will make tutorials once I know what the heck I'm doing. So thanks for sticking through the stream, guys. I'm going to go ahead and end it out here. And I'll get back to you guys in the next one. And hopefully I'll have that root bone issue fixed. All right. So I think I'm streaming now. Okay, so what's your question? Can you custom Lyra animation? I'm not sure exactly what you mean there. Can you use the Lyra animations with motion matching? Is that what you're asking? I'm not sure. What you're asking, what you're like adding, like add custom animations to Lyra. Um, yes. So like walking, I think is already there are already walking animations in Lyra. What you'd need to do is you need to just slow the your movement, and it should maybe it should walk. Lyra has um yeah, Lyra is built in a way where it should be pretty easy to swap out animation sets with other animation sets. There are walking animations. It's just a matter of understanding how different animation layers are bound, um, how anim sets are separated out into different layers, and how those layers are bound to the main animation blueprint. And then then it's also a matter of understanding the editor side structure of experiences, data assets, game modes, that kind of stuff to know how to set things up in a way where you wouldn't start out with a weapon. And yes, I plan, once I get done explaining the locomotion system for Lyra, going through each of its aspects, I want to make more videos on how Lyra works and creating custom different game modes, things like that, unequipping stuff from the character. Because I've been experimenting with Lyra a lot on my end, even if I haven't made a lot of videos on it with the non-locomotion stuff. One of the projects I'm working on, we've just transitioned to Unreal Engine 5, and we've been using Lyra's code and Lyra's system as a foundation, so been learning how all of that works. I will definitely be making videos on that, and I'll definitely make a video on getting the character to walk and to not start out with a weapon equipped, to sort of start with like a clean slate. um, yeah, that would definitely be a good video, so I'll definitely add that to my list and make it sometime soon. Um, I'll send the invite link to the Outcast of School Discord in the live stream chat so that so that you guys can join if you're not already a part of it. But yeah, I have more Lyra videos planned covering that kind of stuff. There's the link to join the Discord, and I will go ahead and end the stream here. So thanks for watching, everyone.